This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. You may have noticed over the last few days, once again, that we are seeing more and more bizarre activity in the sky. You may have also noticed that we're seeing lots and lots of strange weather patterns as well. And what this tells us is that there are massive experiments going on in the sky. Now, the government has to come out and try to explain this to the dumbed down sheeple that this is perfectly normal. That's why there's articles out there right now like, why have the Northern Lights been so visible lately? Why are the Northern Lights no longer the Northern Lights? Why don't we just call them the Southern Lights or the Everywhere Lights? Because they're popping up all over the place. And experts are telling us we are in for a ride, which means there's more to come. Now, while all of these Northern Lights have been popping up, you may have noticed some of the other things. The two moons in the sky that I recently talked about. How they say, well, it might not be visible by the human eye. So then the sheeple out there just automatically go, well, if I'm not going to see two huge moons next to one another, then there's nothing weird going on in the sky anyway, right? And they just dismiss that as, well, there is going to be some stuff going on in the sky. We just want to make sure that you are pre-programmed to think it's just two moons and that we're not really doing anything. On top of that, you may have heard this story in the last couple of days about a rare comet that was streaking across the night sky. So what we could take from this is that there's a lot of strange activity going on in the sky. And the aurora borealis that they're telling you is happening from solar flares is not. It is them messing around in the sky, and they're doing it for more than just weather modification. Now, I've obviously always shown you these articles that are out there about HAARP admitting that they cause artificial auroras, but never explaining to you really why, because the explanation they give is just like CERN. It's a pile of crap that they expect you to intake, not understand what it means, to feel stupid, and automatically accept it because it sounds like something that you can't comprehend or don't understand. That's why they have things like why the scientists used radio transmitters to create artificial auroras. And what we could potentially expect in the future is a major event to occur in the sky, because the fact that we're seeing all of these northern lights around the Earth right now tells us that there's going to be a massive electromagnetic event which likely will shut down the power grid. Specifically, we're seeing it in America, but it is happening all over the Earth right now. And you may remember I've covered this already, a lot of the programming that's out there, right? Remember Tucker Carlson, Dennis Quaid, these are government agents pretending to be conservative. They've been talking about the grid going down. But you might look at that and say, well, look, it's happening. Tucker Carlson's a truther. Dennis Quaid, they're here for us. They're telling us that the grid's going to get shut down. They're warning us about, of course, they're telling you that this is via solar flares. Solar flares are not real. These are all covers and have been covers that the government uses so that you don't get suspicious of government weaponry being turned on and off around you. Most people have zero idea about anything that's actually going on. So all they need to be told is that suddenly the northern lights can be seen in all these other states because of X, Y, and Z, and then they will repeat that to everyone else. They can't fathom that the government themselves have the ability to do this. And in fact, the government is planning on creating a Carrington-like event, which would be a massive, massive grid shutdown where they would short circuit everything. This would be part of a great reset. They'll tell you it's some type of coronal mass ejection from the sun. They'll tell you it's about the Earth's magnetic fields. The sheeple will repeat those sentences and think it's a naturally occurring event because they can't fathom that their government is attempting to sabotage the human race and bring about a great reset. Remember, with the Great Reset, it's about more than just trying to get potions inside of people's bodies. If you really were going to try a reset, the most common thing you would think of is resetting people's bank accounts, making people start from scratch. We live in a society that is completely dependent on electricity, period. I'm dependent on it, you're dependent on it. Some of you may be less dependent on it than others, but 99.9%, let's just be real, 100% of the population cannot survive without electricity. And if you really wanted to cut the human population down, you wouldn't hit a massive, massive, massive EMP that you would call a solar flare, kind of like all the boogeymen that they continually create while they sabotage our lives around us and tell us that it's this, it's a hacker over here, it's climate change there. This is them sabotaging. And this game is going to come to a head when we actually see a massive electromagnetic pulse that they would be creating themselves. And let me start by showing you some of the stuff that's airing on the news, right? Because they're trying to explain away how the northern lights are coming up all over the place. The coronal mass ejection, these are things that people are just accepting as the new reality, right? We have comets flying over the earth, right? All make-believe, which show us that there's experiments going on in the sky for something big, and it's bigger than we could possibly imagine. Don't forget that during the eclipse, we even had NASA and the government admit to sending missiles into the sky because they wanted to make sure you weren't suspicious then as to why they were sending all of these lasers and all these other missiles, quote unquote, into the sky. Things that people just go, I don't know. Why would you send missiles at an eclipse? Well, we're sending missiles there because we're going to test something out. What are you testing out? Well, we're testing something out that you don't understand because you don't understand science, okay? We're all rocket scientists here. You're not allowed to understand what we're trying to do. But in the most basic terms, what you're seeing going on around you is government weaponry being turned on and off for something big to come. And this, of course, is how they explain it away to the sheeple.
It looked like someone brushed a pack of neon highlighters across nature's ceiling. A tie-dye sky draped across much of the country. Wisconsin, New Jersey, the U.S. capital. In Indiana, it was as if Earth's atmosphere decorated for Christmas early. The Aurora Borealis is a show with admission typically reserved for colder climates like Alaska or Iceland. But last night, this northern light was a southern sight. It stretched to Texas, Alabama, Florida. The reason for such a heavenly display, an unusually mighty solar storm created by a huge burst of energy known as a coronal mass ejection. Experts warned all that energy could have disrupted power or communications down here on Earth, but all it seemed to do was power our wonder. And odds are good many across the country will see it again soon. A rare kind of storm lighting up the sky in the best way possible.
You know, we were just talking about the northern lights that captured the attention of so many people across the tri-state area last night. And many eyes will return to the skies again tonight. Astronomers say if you're lucky, you got to be lucky, you might catch a comet that hasn't been seen in tens of thousands of years. John Diaz reports on the best chances to see it.
You really want to wait for the sun to set, but not long after.
30 minutes after and right above where the sun sets is where Bart Freed, the membership chairman of the Amateur Astronomers Association, says is your best opportunity to witness what could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a comet that hasn't been seen from Earth in 80,000 years.
The Neanderthals were the first people to see it. Centuries ago, they were portents of doom. Today, kind of just the opposite.
And soon, experts say, you can spot it with the naked eye across the tri-state area with the best opportunity Saturday night with a clear view looking west.
When there's a good comet, you can't take your eyes off it.
The CCNY Planetarium created a simulation that shows the position of the comet.
The formal name is C2023 A3 Chuchichan Atlas, thought to have originated in the Oort cloud, which is this distant collection of rocks and ice way far away.
Dr. James Hedberg says there's no guarantee it will ever make its way back close enough to Earth to witness it again.
It's these rare moments that, change your lives. This thing has spent, tens of thousands of years getting here.
Why is this so rare?
Because our solar system is pretty cleared out.
Jackie Faraday is with the American Museum of Natural History.
You just don't know if you're ever going to see one because they have to have the right conditions to get the right amount of sunlight and be the right distance away from us.
And while we may be able to actually see the comet, experts say there's nothing to worry about. It is very far away from planet Earth.
So the sheeple see that and they go, ooh, ah, ee, wow. But then when you start talking to them about all these towers that are around us, all these antennas that are around us, they think that that's perfectly normal. Now, well, I mentioned the Carrington event earlier. The Carrington event has been getting mentioned more and more in the mainstream recently, which is a conditioning mechanism. We've seen Tucker Carlson, I said that the alt-right media has been bringing up a Carrington event. They're trying to warn you about something happening with the grid. But remember, the alt-right media is telling you that something with a Carrington event that'll happen to the grid is because the government is being irresponsible. They're not protecting the grid. They need to protect the grid. They got to protect it because solar flares, that's the narrative that the alt-right media has. Not the real narrative, which is the government themselves are trying to and will create a Carrington event. And before the Carrington event occurred, before all electronics were disabled, and electronics in 1859 obviously aren't like electronics today, but they had the telegraph system as their system of communication. Of course, once they disabled that, they brought about new means of communication. And that's what we're headed towards here. A Carrington event, which again, they'll call a solar flare, would be your government creating a massive EMP using all of these things like HAARP, the 5G towers, the antennas that we don't even know about, that are all around us at all times. I mean, they openly tell you that antennas are everywhere, right? You just do basic searches on antennas. It says, we're surrounded by antennas, which are metallic structures that transmit and receive electromagnetic waves, right? This would disable everything from cars to power grids to your cell phone to all of it. And you might say, well, then the government would lose control. Well, then the government would be able to commit mass genocide at levels we've never seen before. And on top of that, of course, people will be dying for their electronics once everything comes back on. But this is the way that they plan on bringing about their green energy and their green system and everybody getting pushed into electric vehicles and so on and so forth. Because nobody's going to comply to an electric vehicle. The majority of people are not going to go buy these electric vehicles without being forced into them. And guess what? When you get a shock to your system, like a year without electricity, most people out there will be so worn down, they'll just be happy to have an electric vehicle so that they could go somewhere to do something other than being trapped on their property or wherever they end up, which is likely some type of FEMA facility. So remember though, before the Carrington event actually occurred, okay, there was aurora borealis all over the earth. And that's what we need to pay attention to, right? Because people out there will hear this and say, okay, let me listen to this here. He's talking about before a Carrington event, there was quote unquote solar flares. No, I'm not talking about solar flares. I'm talking about the aurora borealis. The northern lights appeared everywhere, okay? And you know what else I'm talking about? I'm talking about how HAARP is creating aurora borealises everywhere right now as we speak. How they're actually using the sky to create these artificial auroras because they're sending such strong frequencies into the sky. But you know what else I'm talking about? I'm not just talking about HAARP, because they want people to hear HAARP and just think of HAARP sitting up there in Alaska. Okay, HAARP is instilled on the majority of military bases now. It's not really hard to do. They're literally antennas. There's antennas all around us. They don't necessarily need HAARP. And guess what the biggest antenna of all is? The one that just went up in 2020. Because now we have these 5G towers all around us emitting frequencies. Now, there's a lot of things that come out of these towers. There's lots of problems that this causes humanity, okay? But one of which is not for you to download music faster. What's occurring here with these radiation towers is more than just radiation exposure. It's more than just mind control and frequencies being sent at people. It's weather manipulation, being able to use these things as ways to engineer and steer the weather, but also to send frequencies directly up into the sky, the same way that we would see them creating fake artificial auroras, at places like HAARP. Now, let me play for you this video clip, which is pretty funny, from HAARP, that actually talks about HAARP. This is from about a decade ago. And they talk to you about how high up they want to send these frequencies. Of course, they tell you they don't really know what the benefits of this are, right? But it's something with the military. We're all supposed to be so stupid. And it's very, very clear that these frequency waves that they send up into the sky do not float into outer space. Because if you didn't get the memo yet, space is not real. They are charging the sky. So here you have HAARP explaining what they do, which makes no sense to anyone with common sense. But of course, people who think they understand this stuff will just say we're too dumb to get it. But here's somebody who is a student who worked at HAARP, was on the facility, who says, is it beneficial to humanity? No, I don't think so. And, what really comes of this? Well, it's a mystery, right? Well, it's not really a mystery if you understand and you're actually thinking in terms of this being a weapon and not just some fun game that the government has that they want to do with the sky so that you could, transmit radio signals to one another easier or download music faster or no. This has to do with them literally weaponizing the sky around us using these antennas.
First time I visited HAARP, I didn't even know what it was. I went to HAARP as part of a physics club, the Society of Physics Students. I was a student here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and HAARP at the time held an annual open house event where the public could tour the facility and talk to the scientists.
HAARP is a facility to study the ionosphere, region 60 miles out into space. And that's a region where there's not much density. The air is very thin, mostly plasma, which means electrons and ions.
When I saw this facility and saw how unique and interesting it was, and so when I decided to do my PhD thesis research using the HAARP facility itself. HAARP stands for the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program.
The federal government spent about $300 million. It's the most exquisite of its kind in the world. It's currently owned and operated by the Air Force Research Lab. And they have other priorities. They've done some tests over the years. Now they want to go do other things. So it's become a bit of an orphan, sitting down there in Kokona. The U.S. has the lead in the world in this area. It would be a shame to give that up. The other facilities aren't nearly as flexible or as powerful. And HAARP can do science that the other two can't. There's a chart that shows, it compares all the heaters, including air receiver. You can see that it's quite a bit more powerful and more flexible.
It's an instrument that allows us to make small changes to the ionosphere, and then we can measure the response of the ionosphere in the upper atmosphere to the changes that HAARP is making. Scientists have categorized the various layers of the atmosphere. Most of the weather that we experience occurs in the troposphere. When we fly in commercial aircraft, we're generally flying at the top of the troposphere. Above that is the stratosphere, and above that is the mesosphere, and above that is the thermosphere. And the ionosphere is basically part of the thermosphere, which extends from about 80 to 100 kilometers altitude all the way up to about 1,000 kilometers altitude. And so the ionosphere is generally what we refer to as the partially ionized portion of the thermosphere. It's too high for weather balloons and it's too low for many satellites. And sure, we can launch rockets through the ionosphere too, as we do at Poker Flat, but those are very fast but expensive experiments. The reason why we care about the ionosphere, particularly for radio communication, is that radio waves, when traveling through free space, behave differently when they travel through a region of charged particles or plasma. The ionosphere is basically a partially ionized plasma, and so one of the things that can happen to radio waves that travel through a plasma is that they can be bent, their polarization can change, they can be absorbed. And since so much of our lives is really dependent on radio communication, either communicating to satellites or for navigation with GPS, which is also communicating with satellites essentially, or over-the-horizon communication or over-the-horizon radar, it's really important for us to understand how radio waves are affected by the ionosphere, and in some cases how radio waves affect the ionosphere in the case of HAARP or other powerful radio transmitters.
A lot of us realize how important it is, how powerful, how significant the facility is. So we're trying to figure out ways to keep it alive as an active scientific tool.
Why would it be beneficial? I can't speak for the applications, but it's a mystery to solve. We can think of the ionosphere as a natural plasma laboratory, the conditions of which are difficult to replicate in an actual physical laboratory. And so this is just another way of learning about the world around us. Why would it be beneficial? I can't speak for the applications, but it's a mystery to solve.
So that right there is directly from HAARP themselves. So like I said earlier in the video, we're in for a ride. These are the narratives that they're feeding to us now. We're in for a ride. We can expect more bizarre things in the sky day in and day out. And in addition to the stuff I talked about, we can also think a lot about things like Project Bluebeam as well. But one thing is for sure, none of this is naturally occurring. None of this is coincidental. And you can see by how the government is behaving. All you have to do is watch their behavior. What's the big story that they keep pushing out there about misinformation? Soon you'll probably start hearing stories, not just about HAARP, you'll probably start hearing stories about 5G towers and what conspiracy theorists say about those towers and how some people want to take those towers down. Well, those towers are very, very important to what they're trying to do. So maybe civilians should find some of these landowners who have allowed these towers to be put on their land because they've been paid off by companies like Verizon and AT&T, when it's really your government using your tax money to pay these people off to put them on their property. Should we be able to hold them accountable? Now, I know in a courtroom we'd never be able to win. So shouldn't the civilians be able to go to these people and say, hey, look, I don't know anything about this tower, but I think that since you're putting this up and this is submitting frequencies, that we all as human beings around you should have a right to know more about it. But they don't want you to even think or ask questions about it. They want you to just automatically dismiss it, to go about your day. Don't worry about the anxiety, the panic, the weird weather patterns, right? The aurora borealis, which were once only seen in Alaska, now appearing everywhere, every day. And the government having to come out and say, yeah, we're in for a ride. We're going to see them over and over and over again. And they don't expect you to think that there's anything suspicious about it. But, oh, there's a lot suspicious about it. Watch the dueling narratives out there, right? Dual moons appearing right now. Comets that we haven't seen in 80,000 years, which we know is all make-believe. Oh, 80,000 years, we haven't seen this comet. I'm glad somebody from 80,000 years ago documented for this for us. Did they write it on a rock somewhere and we found it? I mean, they just make stuff up. They label 80,000 years. You're supposed to just go, wow, that's crazy phenomenon, right? It's them playing games in the sky. They are running experiments day in and day out, and they are testing their weapons right now around us. That's what it shows us. That's what we're seeing in the sky shows us. But of course, they need some excuses out there like solar flares, geomagnetic storms, all these things so that you think it's just naturally occurring and you go about your day. Because if you realize what we've given our government the ability to do and the technology that they have, people would not allow it to stand anymore. They would come out of the left-right divide. Well, I would like to think that they would. Then again, it seems like nothing at this point is going to pull anybody out of that. But don't forget the talk about the Carrington event. They want you to know about the Carrington event, okay? They wouldn't be talking about it if they didn't want you to know about it. They're telling you about it so that when it does happen, you're already programmed into thinking, oh, well, this happened in the 1800s. This happened with a solar flare in the 1800s. Not to mention that there was aurora borealis right before it, but you don't hear the media talking about how right before the Carrington event, the northern lights were appearing everywhere, right? And right now, the mainstream media is quietly putting stories out there, at least on the conservative media, about what a Carrington event is so that you're programmed into knowing what it is. But you don't hear them talking about why we're seeing all these northern lights right now and potentially about how we could have a massive, massive grid shutdown via a solar flare, which is all make-believe. This is your government weaponizing itself against its civilians. And what would be the best possible way to take civilians down, to take down society? It would be to shut the electrical grid off. Nobody realizes that. I think too many people think that they could expect a tank to roll down their street or something along those lines, which will occur. But really, if you're going to neutralize people, you're going to shut down the electric grid. Nobody will be able to not only communicate, forget that. People won't be able to survive because we become so dependent on the system, right? Majority of people don't know how to find water that's clean to drink. You just turn on your faucet. How lucky. 100 years ago, people had to figure out where they were getting their water every day, right? So they'd make well pumps and things like that. They'd make sure they settled on land where there was access to water, so it was something they didn't have to worry about. Well, we haven't done that, have we? We haven't done that, not to mention the fact that they're poisoning our water that's coming down with this acid rain anyway for people who do have wells. You need a lot of things to clean the water these days. Ever notice that? How many things we need to clean the water? Then you can just look into the whole farming aspect of it, right? 10 out of 10 people are more used to getting Uber Eats every other day than they are of even growing a tomato in a pot. They don't even know how to do that. So the government's ready. And when we think about the Georgia Guidestones and the number on the Georgia Guidestones and how to get down to that number, everybody's mind has been so focused on the magic potion. And of course, the magic potion played a part of it. But there's phases to this. Phases. They weren't going to wipe out the whole population with that because the majority of the population wasn't taking it in the first place. But how could they do this in a way where they could get away with it? Well, they tell everybody it's a solar flare, even though people should be suspicious of the northern lights appearing, right? And then thinking about what I just told you about right before the Carrington event, how the northern lights were appearing all the time. And people were like, what is going on? And they're like, oh, I don't know. The sky is just green. Oopsies, there goes the telegraph. There goes the electrical grid. Now, it didn't have the same type of effect back then that it would now because there wasn't as many people dependent on technology as there are now. Everybody is dependent on it. So if you were going to take out a population, you were going to reduce it, that would be the best and easiest way to do it. Then, of course, those who survive, those who comply and might go to those camps or however it ends up happening, that people somehow survive this over a period of time, because it can't be too long. It can't be 20 years with the grid off, okay? Well, they come in with their green grid, with reduced electricity. They come in and they tell you, well, you know, we're going to live differently now. Our behavior is going to change, that the solar flares had something to do with the climate as well, and we need to change our behavior. And you'll just be thrilled. You'll be thrilled that the government's giving you food and water, right? Because it was so hard to survive without it, because we've been trained to be completely useless idiots. We grew up, we went through the school system, we were told that this was smart and normal. We were smarter than other generations before us because we're going to school and college. We're so gifted and talented. We're idiots. Or the majority of us are complete idiots. Let's be real. Now, I'm not saying me or you specifically, but humanity. We barely know how to do anything anymore. And 10 out of 10 people, when they try to figure something out, have to go to YouTube or Google search it to figure it out. Those are things we should have been trained in the school systems with. And we weren't by design. We were trained with what? Nonsense, lies of history. Specifically, the greatest lie in history, so we would be sympathetic to a certain group of people that we wouldn't question, who are really the ones who were behind all of this in the first place. So keep an eye on the bizarre stuff in the sky, ladies and gentlemen. We're in for a ride, day in, day out. What did I just talk about? Desensitizing people to these things in the sky. What is that doing? Desensitizing people to these things in the sky. They are going about their day just going, look, it's the Northern Lights. No big deal. Why? Because scientists tell us that it's no big deal. We're in for a ride. We're going to see them almost every day now. And then the next thing you know, there's going to be a Carrington-like event, but it ain't going to be from solar flares. It's going to be from them creating a massive electromagnetic pulse that we've allowed them to set up around us via all these antennas, etc., that are everywhere right now. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless all of you as always and your families.